Welcome back. We're glad you decided to stay for Act 2, and we hope it's not just because of that barge incident we reported towards the end of Act 1. Anyway, time to pay some bills.
The Billie Limacher Bicentennial Park Theater in Joliet is the place where local talent, community theater, and children shine off on center stage. Next weekend, come see Clarence Darrow, a one-man play of the famous attorney who accepted unpopular cases and defended unpopular causes. Having a special occasion? Rent the park. Available dates go quickly. Call 815-754-3761 for availability.
I've heard that many stories are written or inspired simply by a normal situation, putting two people in a particular place or time to see how they react. I'd say that sometimes even the writers are surprised at the turns a story takes. What happens if, perhaps, we find a couple at an aging amusement park by the sea, such as in the Beast of Venice Pier?
Ray, why did you drag me to this old pier? This place is dangerous. Those old rides could cause tetanus. I know you're into some weird stuff, Ray, but that doesn't mean I have to be into it too. Why can't we go someplace we both enjoy, not just...
I wonder what that dinosaur is doing lying there on the beach.
Can we ever go to what?
That dinosaur. See its skeleton there on the sand?
That's a roller coaster.
No, it's not. It's a dinosaur.
You're weird, Ray. Ray, what are you doing? Come back to bed.
Of course. That's it.
What's it?
That dinosaur. Rising from the depths after 1 billion years of slumber.
What dinosaur?
The one at the Venice Pier. It hurt.
What are you talking about?
I'll tell you if you'll just listen.
Don't tell me to shut up.
I'm not. I'm telling you to listen.
No, you're telling me to shut up.
Anyway, it heard the foghorn blowing, thought it was the sound of another dinosaur, and swam into shore, hoping for an encounter with another of its kind.
That's a foghorn.
I know that. I just said it was a foghorn. Then when it discovered it was nothing but a damn lighthouse...
You kissed your mother with that mouth?
Yes, I do. Then the dinosaur tore the whole lighthouse down, crawled up on the beach, and died of a broken heart.
You're weird, Ray.
Well, I guess that answered that question. We have an update on the Joliet traffic.
The McDonough Street Bridge is closed to land travel due to a disabled barge caught sideways between the towers. If you're on the west side, we would recommend turning around and heading to Jefferson. But a train has you boxed in, so you won't be going anywhere for a while. Meanwhile, if you're on the east side, you could always try I-80. I wouldn't, but you could.
And while that gets sorted out, another example of putting two people in a place to see what happens, the story of the pawn shop owner and the dyslexic vampire.
Our story begins with a disappointed pawn shop owner trying to sell the last of her stock. With her is a strange flower that changes color to match the candor of the person speaking. To call it a lie detector plant would be selling it short, as it could distinguish exaggeration, fanciful wishes, half-truths, and ironies in their various degrees. It could even detect when a speaker was lying to oneself. The pawn shop owner had done well negotiating prices, but not well enough to fulfill her dream of providing a plant just like it for every political discourse. Let's see what happens when an angry vampire enters her shop and intersects her dreams.
Can I help you?
You can help me. I could make the same mistake over and over each time I come here.
I've never seen you before.
The pawn shop owner looked to her plant beside her, hoping to gauge the nature of this obvious lie.
You've never seen me, but I've seen you. I saw you tomorrow and every day after that going back 3 years ago. Each time you borrowed me from the store. But I'm warning you, if you do not agree to get rich, you're going to see me again yesterday.
The bewildered shop owner again looked to her plant for some opinion.
You're right in what you're thinking. The soul flower can detect many subtleties, but it can't detect insanity. Or it would have ratted me out the moment I came stopped in. I have a strange psychosis, the first of its kind. Deep time psychosis, I call it. I got it by traveling too much while being a vampire. I know, the plant over there is calling that an oversimplification. But I'm sure you don't want the whole story. Calkins is the name, and psychosis, dyslexia, and being a vampire. My claims to fame.
Okay, the plant agrees with your introduction, but I don't want any trouble. I'm trying to sell everything in this place, so I don't have to move it. If you're buying, pick my bones and name your price. I'll take a loss on everything, but I'm not interested in anything you'd sell me to make me rich.
That's a lie, according to the soul flower.
I see you've noticed my little lie detector. I'm not sure, though, what part of that was a lie.
Try the statement piece by piece.
Well, obviously, I'm not going to sell anything for less than I paid for it, unless I really have to. And I don't want any trouble. And the last thing I want to do is buy more stuff. Where was the lie then?
Maybe that you're not interested in buying anything. You just don't think I have anything you want. Could that be it, soul flower?
Well, I can't think of anything I'd be willing to buy, no matter how low the price.
You'd pay everything you have for another soul flower and be glad of it.
Of course you know that's true. Most of my other customers can't read my plant, but I'm very busy, so unless you have a soul plant to sell me and are willing to accept everything in the store safe as payment.
No!
Good. The discussion about me buying something from you must be over. Have a nice day.
But it's not over. I'm here to help you get the money to buy your whole greenhouse full of soul flowers. You are going to be rich.
The plant says you haven't lied, so I'm listening. But get to the point.
I happen to have the only copy in existence of a very special manuscript. Wait, of course I mean unless I go to my printer and make another copy.
Just because it's rare doesn't mean it's valuable.
This one is. I wrote it myself.
And you think that a manuscript written by a vampire is a collectible, right? Do you have some letter of authenticity or some other proof that you wrote this while being a vampire? I didn't think so. Have a nice day.
But wait! Maybe you've read my other works. Have you read the novel Ruthless? I have written it very carefully not to offend anyone. It was a bold new idea for me.
Oh God, make this stop. Let's see the manuscript.
Look, I might mistype, misread, misspeak, and miswrite, but the wisdom in this document will make you the only person able to know when anyone is telling the truth or not. Please, I don't want to keep coming here, and I'm running out of time. If you don't buy this, then I'll just come back yesterday, like I've done for every day for the past future 3 years. Every time you look the papers over, offer a price, but then kick me out and bar me from the store. I'm running out of yesterdays to come here, because if I sell you the manuscript before the leprechaun sells you the soul flower, you'll never know I'm telling you the truth.
Wait, leprechaun? What? Look, vampire. I'm sure you're very wise, but I don't have time for a confused conversation about confusing words. and I just want to ask the right question that will end this negotiation. Wait, I just thought of something. Why do you think this manuscript will make me rich? Is there someone you know that's willing to pay a fortune for it? The Soulflower will know if you're lying.
Of course I know someone. Future you. Trust me. 50 years from now, when you're a hero and everyone plans to interview you, you'll tell them you still don't believe how cheap it was to become the first zillionaire.
Okay, I surrender. I'll buy the manuscript if we can come to a price. Look, I don't know about any wisdom on this sheet of paper, and I'm sure I'm never going to sell it to someone who wants to read it, but the paper is recyclable. With paper shortage and inflation, I'll give you $2,000 for it.
15.
We're too far apart, but thanks for bringing it in.
We're not far apart at all. I found $15. Keep the change as a tip. But you have to promise to read the manuscript.
That sounds suspicious. Why do you think this manuscript will make me rich? I want the whole truth.
Because the manuscript has a map that leads to a priceless treasure, like troves of scrolls, artifacts, works of art, to say nothing of precious metals. Actually, the whole thing looks like a heap of ancient junk to me. But to you, well, you know how to change its value into current currency that replicants appreciate. And what's more important, I didn't imagine the whole thing. I do that sometimes. I imagine things and they just appear. But don't blame me for inflation, though. I'm always very careful not to imagine currency. It's not me that minted too many $1,000 bills. Okay, in the distant past, I might have over-minted with my mind, but not this time. The treasure trove is real.
Oh, forget out. And have a nice, never mind.
The defeated vampire slouched away. He never realized that he'd written map to the temporal treason instead of map to the Templar treasure.
And now for something completely different, traveling with the moon.
I looked up in the morning sky and saw the moon waning goodbye. My eyes then traveled to the wood. In golden light, a deer there stood. A little bird nearby did sing its happy song that told of spring. The deer too heard the happy tune and then moved on to follow the moon. Oh, would that I could follow too into woods of golden hue and high up into skies of blue. The bird and I would make a pact and ride upon the deer's soft back. Then up into the sky we'd go, the green woods small and far below. We'd follow the moon across the sea and come back home eventually with tales of wonder and sights oh so grand that we'd seen from the sky, on the sea, and on land. 'Tis but a dream, you say to me? A fairy tale? A fantasy? Ah, but this feather I have here, it is a precious souvenir of the dream that I sailed across the sea. The moon, the bird, the deer, and me.
Looking for an independently owned full-service espresso bar? Or a local panini soup cafe? Look no further than the Book and Bean Cafe in Joliet. The cafe is conveniently housed in the Black Road branch of the Joliet Public Library and is a favorite spot for board gamers, artists, writers, and anyone looking for terrific food and a friendly atmosphere. Make Book and Bean Cafe your next stop coffee shop. You won't be sorry.
Another way to create a story is to explore dilemmas out of context. or simply turn convention on its head. Our next story, a desperate spouse in the late 1800s struggles to cling to her faith, while a progressive physician urges her to consider an emerging treatment, all while her husband pursues the big story in A Little Wine for Your Stomach.
It is late 1895 in Munsonville, Michigan, a fictional fishing village in the northern part of the state. A nomadic, religiously zealous family consisting of a father, George Clare, a mother, Isabella Clare, and their 12-year-old daughter, Marie, are stuck in the village inn because George is near death due to repeatedly vomiting large amounts of blood. George is a journalist who spent his life chasing after the big story. Isabella is an heiress who is supporting the trio. She's refused a second blood transfusion and insists on treating George's illness with wine, following the advice the Apostle Paul gave to Timothy in his first letter to Timothy. Use a little wine because of your stomach. Even though the doctor treating George has ordered her to stop it. As the doctor prepares to leave, Isabella stops him and an argument ensues.
Dr. Parks, please wait. He seems so weak. Are you certain the water will help him?
Maybe, but a blood transfusion.
You and your blood transfusions. I'm so sick of hearing about blood transfusions. Look at him. Much worse than the transfusion.
Because of the wine you gave him, not the transfusion.
Wine nourishes the stomach.
Wine also eats it away.
Dr. Parks, how does your fountain gush forth fresh water and bitter water? How can you bring both blessing and cursing?
He opened his mouth to reply, but Isabella held up her hand.
Your vile reputation is well known, even if my husband won't admit it. Yet it's also clear the Spirit of the Lord is upon you, that He has anointed you to bring healing. Why do you persist in opposing the God who's gifted you?
Mrs. Clare, it's you who are blocking your husband's healing. Why do you persist in giving this man alcohol when it's clearly detrimental for him?
Not alcohol, Doctor, wine. And not just any wine, not even the highly touted tonic wine, but pure wine of the highest quality. Wine, my father.
Wine is still alcohol. Your husband's stomach is wounded. Giving him wine will
Bind his wounds, as the Samaritan did for the poor beaten man at the side of the road, and calm his stomach, as it did for young Timothy, disciple of Paul.
Dr. Parks's features hardened, and deep lines appeared near his mouth. He took a deep breath and then quoted,
he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine or vinegar of strong drink.
Dr. Parks, I am not interested in hearing you twist scripture to support your intemperance theories. Drink lightly if you must, but don't force your beliefs on us. You are here to treat my husband, not moralize.
I'm speaking as a medical doctor, as one who's observed the detriment of alcohol abuse in his patients. I implore you.
Any good medicine that's abused, Dr. Parks, will cause detriment. My own cousin developed a craving for laudanum after her physician prescribed it for her insomnia. However, the wine my George drinks is not abuse. He drinks to calm his afflicted stomach. God's very word recommended it.
Dr. Parks sighed and rolled his eyes. Isabella flushed with rage, took another step, and raised her voice.
And the Messiah himself has visited and instructed us. We cannot disobey.
Mrs. Clare, please, do not give this man any more wine. I'm not even certain the infusion in bismuth will be sufficient. Not this time. He really needs more blood.
The only blood my George needs is the blood of his Savior, which comes from wine, which God himself have given us.
Mrs. Clare, alcohol increases acid secretion.
Wine protects the stomach.
This acid has eaten a hole in his stomach. Do you understand? The continual consumption has left this hole bleeding and raw and full of tiny spiral-shaped creatures that are having a continual feast at the peril of your husband.
You vivisectionist, of course you'd know that. Dice people up into bits to satisfy your morbid curiosity. The only holes in people's stomachs are the ones You brutally chucked into them.
I learned about the detrimental effects of alcohol by treating its after effects in fools like you and your husband.
Get out now!
He took a breath, and then he took a longer one before speaking.
Mrs. Clare.
Shut up.
Mrs. Clare. He's bled so much he's in danger of death, and you won't even allow me to replace the blood. The most we can do is hope, and that is hope only, no guarantees, that the fluid I replaced, along with rest and time, will allow your husband's body to heal and recreate his own blood.
Isabella's shoulders sagged. She lowered her head, thinking or praying. Then she looked back up at Dr. Parks, her face brightening.
Yes, that is the best way, for we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I do thank you, Doctor, for being the channel of healing for my George. Don't you see? He now only needs a little wine for stomach. Remember, God always says, give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts.
No more wine.
But God himself has advised us.
Look, all scripture is based on personal interpretation. It's not as if God himself returned to earth.
But he did. The Messiah himself sat next to us on a train and spoke to us face to face, one person to another.
Mrs. Clare, do you actually expect me to believe that the Lord himself came down from heaven to join your family on a train?
Of course not.
Good, because I was beginning to think.
We were on our way to Denver when George became afflicted. As George writhed in pain, the conductor approached us and said, the Messiah was on, and if we so desired, he would send for him at once.
What?
George asked his name and responded with, I am. Then he asked where we stored the wine. The Messiah blessed all of it, selected one bottle, and called out for a loaf, which a customer fished out of a bag. Then he blessed the wine, gave thanks to the Father, and told George to drink. After a time, he blessed the bread, gave a portion of it to George to eat. This bread, blessed by God, did not cause him distress.
What?
He told us George's affliction was his thorn in the flesh, but he exhorted him to take a little wine for his stomach, that he may bear it. So how dare you, Doctor, to contradict the will of the Almighty God?
Mrs. Clare, you've spent your lives chasing down the scoop that will make the world notice your husband's ingenuity and talents. Now why, in God's great name in heaven, did your husband not interview the Messiah when he had the opportunity? And please don't tell me the Messiah refused.
The delicate nature of George's health often interferes with timely reporting. This has been his great frustration. Why do you think we're here, if not to report on the birth of John Simmons' child? And even that opportunity was stolen from us by the repugnant Henry Matthews. As for interviewing the Messiah, do you think we are gullible? Naive?
The look on Dr. Parks's face showed exactly that.
Goodness, how dare you disrespect me? Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father was? Do you realize how much money he donated to Johns Hopkins? Dr. Parks, we knew this man was the Messiah because other newspapers had already reported. I'm assuming you read newspapers. A story from George about the Messiah would not be fresh news. A story about the Messiah would not advance the dream. Besides, it's too late. He's returned to the Father.
Mrs. Clare, I'm so confused.
The Messiah, he went to Mexico this year and vanished as he did 40 days after his resurrection.
Dr. Parks rubbed his face with both hands. Then he rose and picked up his hat and bag. After glancing at his patient with a mixture of grave concern and pity, he trudged to the door and opened it. Then he paused and turned around. His face looked kind, but the anger in his eyes, terrible.
Mrs. Clare, his stomach needs rest. If you pour him another drop, I will send for the constable.
Do we have any PBS fans in the studio audience tonight? I have a feeling this would be a crowd that would have a few PBS fans. WTTW, Window to the World, that's what I thought. The next poem was inspired by Jeffrey Bear, episode talking about Marshall Fields. I know, they call it Macy's now, but for us real Chicago types, it'll always be Marshall Fields. Anyway, he talked about the big green clock and how many people would plan to meet up under the big green clock, not realizing there's not one, but two big green clocks. Here's how a blind date or a first date for a couple meeting online might go.
I promised to meet her at 3:15,
I promised to meet him at 3:15,
beneath the green clock on the corner,
beneath the green clock on the corner,
wearing red mittens and a striped hat,
wearing a black hat and red gloves,
with a cup of cocoa and a croissant,
with a cup of coffee and a donut,
hoping
believing
she couldn't be late.
he wouldn't be late.
Yet here I stand,
Yet here I stand,
beneath the green clock,
beneath the green clock,
in red mittens and a striped hat,
in a black hat and red gloves,
holding a tepid cup of cocoa and a chili croissant.
holding an ice-cold cup of coffee and a stale donut.
Until 4:17 I stand,
Until 4:22 I stand,
muttering,
cursing,
at the corner of State and
at
Randolph,
the corner of State and Washington,
when I walk slowly away.
when I sadly turn for home.
As we get close to the end of our evening, we want to thank everyone who's made this possible. The staff of Bicentennial Park for hosting this event and putting up with our endless technical and logistical questions. A huge thank you to the Joliet Public Library that allows us to use their space and supports us in so many ways, putting our books on their shelves and hosting events. To the Book and Bean Cafe that keeps us energized, caffeinated, and nourished. To Jan Staley from the Book Market, who's so supportive of local writers, hosting book signings, allowing us a creative outlet, providing checkout services this evening. Barbara Eberhard and her Stories Are Us Storytellers. Barbara hosts the monthly storytelling event at Nick and Ivy's in Lockport. For details, you can ask Barbara herself, as she's probably somewhere in the audience. Thank you to our guest reader, Anne Magosky. Also to Rachel Bears for her guidance and patience. We all, individually and as a group, thank our families for putting up with our peculiarities, our late nights at typewriters, laptops, notebooks, or just shuffling random sheets of paper. Finally, we thank you for taking the time to be here in person, to support us, to give us an audience, to share this crazy, silly, thought-provoking, sentimental ride in the evening. Before we get to our final piece, let's take a moment to meet the creators and actors that brought you tonight's stories. Ed Calkins. Coop. Duanne Walton. Estell. Steve Cordin. Maureen Blevins. And our fearless leader, Denise Baran-Unland. I'm Sean Magosky. I've been your host for the evening. Now, a word from Denise.
Good evening. Before we read tonight's final piece, we have one voice that should be heard, and that is of WriteOn Joliet's co-leader Tom Hernandez, who had to step back from the group this year to concentrate on his health. WriteOn Joliet is a welcoming, diverse group of writers of varied skills, interests, and experience in genres, who gather twice a month in a safe, comfortable, and supportive atmosphere at the Black Road branch of the Joliet Public Library. We share our works, and we share constructive feedback so that everyone can benefit from shared knowledge. And of course, new members are always welcome. WriteOn Joliet got its start in the fall of 2011 when a young writer, Christina Skaggs, approached me quite a few times with a request that we start a writers group together. My family was in crisis at that time and I couldn't commit to another project. So each time my answer was a very firm no. In January 2012, I held a one-time critique event at the former Harwood Post in Joliet, where writers could pay $5 for a 15-minute critique of their work, with the money being donated to Big Brothers Big Sisters of Will and Grundy counties. Christina came to the event and passed around a notebook asking attendees to sign if they were interested in her and I starting a writers group. She presented it to me at the end of the evening, and WriteOn was born. We held our first meeting in February 2012 under the umbrella of the Three Rivers Arts Council. When the council lost its space at the end of the year, Christina approached the Joliet Public Library to see if WriteOn could grow a partnership there. The answer was yes, and WriteOn became WriteOn Joliet. Now in 2013, Christina became a new mom and stepped back from leadership. So Tom, a fairly new member at the time, stepped up. Since that time, he and I have worked together, sometimes quarreling behind the scenes, to build a strong, active, continually growing, and ever-evolving, cohesive group WriteOn Joliet is today. In the fall of 2013, and against my strong resistance, Tom scheduled WriteOn's first mic night at the Book and Bean Cafe inside the Joliet Library. Now, whereas some people like Tom, Duanne, Cean thrive on stage, the rest of us are more comfortable behind a computer, not in front of a microphone. But Tom insisted that writers should be prepared to read our works aloud to an audience. So we did it, speaking at the rate of 1,000 words a minute, rattling our papers with our shaking hands and knocking our knees on trembling legs. Oh, and Duanne recorded it all and posted it on his YouTube page, as he has done with every WriteOn event and open mic since. After the first one, WriteOn Joliet hosted a mic night once or twice a year at the cafe. Our last one was Calkins Day 2020, a month before the shutdown, so we hope to schedule another one this year. And if you don't know what Calkins Day is, Ed will explain it to you in the lobby after the show. So that is why Tom's voice must be heard in this theater tonight. For I can promise you, we would not be here if he had not pushed us to develop our live audience skills. But what to read? Tom, a former columnist for the Naperville Sun, is a voluminous writer. He has a blog that goes back to 2016. He has published several books of essays, poems, short fiction, and one novel, all of which are for sale here tonight. And as a side note, while Tom was pushing us, he was pushing himself. Writing fiction is a struggle for him, and yet, while he is addressing other matters this year, he is working on a second novel. So the poem I brought tonight is a personal favorite of mine. He sent it to me for feedback before a meeting in 2015, and I liked it so much I printed a copy and tacked it behind my computer at work. And it remained there until that office location closed in 2021. The poem is simply called Bridge. I have failed you in 1,000 ways, in 1,000 moments, for 1,000 days. Though undeserved, shaded jealousy, barking acidic words, love strong, but flesh weak. Passionate embraces left unmade, full heart yet empty arms, leaving spirit scathed. Faithless doubt heading a trail of fears, untrue concerns looming, drawing drowning tears. Yet your patience, soft as morning dew, you accept my flawed soul, God's live grace in you. Your glory my troubled spirit lights, lifting to a higher ground of brilliant sights. For this, I will be the bridge you cross, from fields of pain to joy, where nothing is lost. Honoring you in 1,000 ways, in 1,000 moments, for 1,000 days. Thank you.
One of the greatest honors any writer can receive is being asked by someone else to create a piece. Because then we get to throw around words like commission, and that's really cool. It's also a recognition by someone else that maybe, just maybe, we might be good. And we all crave that reassurance. My brother Seth was a noted historian here in town. In fact, we would often say he lived history. So when he decided his annual Christmas party would be a 1940s theme, complete with scratchy 78 records played on a Wurlitzer jukebox, and a tree covered with shiny bright Christmas ornaments and tiny bubble lights, I was charged with creating something with a 1940s wartime feel. What I wrote down was a simple Christmas prayer or blessing that if you close your eyes, you might imagine you'd find searching through the static of an old tube radio. Maybe you'd hear something like this, with apologies to Edward R. Murrow, a Christmas prayer.
Bless us, Lord, this Christmas time, as all throughout the year. Watch over those so far away, until we hold them near. Bring truth, bring peace to all the troops abroad, and all the ships at sea. May next year find us safe at home, wherever home may be.